Welcome to Between Two Wetlands, the Village of Suamico podcast where we take a closer look at the projects and people shaping our community. I'm your host and Village Administrator, Alex Caker, and each episode will share the stories and details behind the decisions that impact all of us. On today's podcast, I'm joined by Village Treasurer and Finance Director Katie Demeny, where we talk about how tax bills work and the Village's 2026 General Fund budget. Please visit our website at suamico.org to learn more. All right, Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
So we're recording this after Christmas, but before New Year's. Did you get anything that you wanted for Christmas?
A trip to Hawaii.
A trip to Hawaii?
Yeah.
When is this happening?
February.
February?
Yeah.
And you're staying there for how long?
7 days.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I had nothing of that nature. I got one of those glob ball things that you use to take the dust off in your car. And I got some of those like elastic bands that you stretch with because I have a terrible back.
It's useful stuff.
Yeah, not quite Hawaii, but
Yeah.
that's cool.
Enjoyable.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking today about tax bills and a little bit of our budget. We could definitely get into a lot more detail on it, but I think for now we're just going to focus on some of the basics and make sure our residents understand what's on their tax bill before we get too deep into things like levy limits and tax incremental financing districts. That'll be for another podcast of ours, which I'm sure you're looking forward to as well. But for now, let's just give the audience a little background on yourself and your role with the village.
Sure. So I am the finance director and treasurer for the village and have been since last September. I've worked at other municipalities and also in the audit realm. So I come from a lot of different background on different knowledge bases, working with different municipalities.
That's great. And so you kind of have some background on tax bills in different municipalities, and they're pretty much the same, but can you walk us through a little bit about the logistics of creating the tax bill? What does that process look like?
Sure. Creating the tax bill is really a collaborative effort between the village, between the county, and also the school districts. We all have our own piece of the puzzle and part of the rate. So everyone kind of figures their own rate out on their own. And really the village then adds those rates together and does some verification before sending the overall rate to the county to finalize the calculation of the tax bills.
All right, so yes, we as the village, we have our name on the tax bill that goes out. We collect the tax bill, but we don't, when a resident writes a check, and I get this question often from residents, is that they'll give us a check, say it's for $8,000, and they may not understand that that $8,000 doesn't necessarily go just to the village of Suamico. How does that work? Where is all those funds going?
Yep, so the rates that I had just talked about, each jurisdiction has their proportionate share of the bill. So based on the rate, the municipality gets a certain percentage, the county gets a certain percentage, same with the school district and the tech school. So really in January here coming up, I will look at how much we've collected, and based on the proportionate share, I then distribute those funds to the other jurisdictions.
And I think in previous years, and it's always changing a couple percentage points one way or the other, but out of a normal person's tax bill in Suamico, about like 23% actually goes to the village, correct?
Yeah, I would say that's fairly accurate, yeah.
Okay. And then there's a lot going on the tax bill. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of letters going on.
Yep.
One of the big ones that people see is the assessed value versus the equalized value. Can you talk a little bit about what the difference is and why it matters?
Yeah, so the fair market value is a number that gets updated every year by the state for the value of the area of your property. The assessed value is done, I would say, every couple years. There's some state rules on how frequently it needs to happen. But that's where the village uses the assessed rate but other jurisdictions need to use the fair market value. So they need to, on the bill, show both, because it correlates with how the rates were determined.
Yeah, and I know that it's very confusing on how all of this works, and what you just gave was maybe 4 or 5 sentences worth. The state of Wisconsin Department of Revenue puts out a guide for understanding how assessments work, and it has been over 1,000 pages long, and so that gives you a little sense of how complicated and nuanced assessments are. Though they've dropped it now, I think it's in the 900s, so it's not as confusing anymore.
Yeah, right.
But I know that's difficult for some people to pick up and understand, and unless you're working in it every day, it is very difficult to understand the differences. But yes, we as the village use the assessed values. We did a revaluation in 2025. The last time was back in 2020, and before that was 2009. And what the village of Suamico has been doing has been waiting until we reach that threshold where we're required to do a revaluation. And this is starting to get into the weeds a little bit, but once your assessed value is plus or minus 10% of the equalized value, you get 5 years from that point to do a revaluation. There are some communities out there, and there's at least one in Brown County that actually does revaluations every single year, and that is an option to us. There's pros and cons to both. Obviously, the con is it does cost money. The revaluation that we did in 2025 cost the village $88,000. So yeah, we could do a revaluation every year, but that requires us to collect more money to pay for it, right? So there's pros and cons to it, but we've been doing it as needed. So moving on to something else on the tax bill, there's that school levy tax credit, and/or there's a first dollar credit. Can you give us a sense on what those mean and where people would see that in their bill?
Sure. So those credits come after all of the jurisdiction rates, and so it takes it off the total. It really is a value that the state provides to the county, and so that's kind of that last part that the county helps calculate the final bill. But those values are from the state, determined based off of different values. They change between municipalities and/or school districts. So, like I said, it's really a value we get from the state.
Okay. And then beyond the standard property tax, on the right side of your tax bill, some people might see special assessments or fees. What are some special assessments or fees that people should expect or can get on the village portion of the bill?
Yeah, so a standard one is the stormwater management fee. It's something that the village puts on the tax bill. It's just an annual charge. Other municipalities might include that on a utility bill. It can kind of show up in different places, but for the village, it is on the tax bill. So that's a standard one for every property. Another one would be for garbage and recycle. That's an annual charge. So what's on the tax bill this year is covering your garbage for 2026 for pickup. Other fees that could be on there are delinquent utility bills. Had a bill not been paid by November 15th, it gets rolled onto the tax bill. So those are some of the more standard fees that are located on that side of the tax bill.
And then some of these properties actually wouldn't see some fees. So for example, the stormwater fee isn't going to show up on a vacant parcel of land because they don't have unimpervious. So quick editor's note here, the correct term is impervious. Unimpervious is not a word. Surfaces, some of the commercial properties that don't have garbage and recycling collection wouldn't see a garbage and recycling fee on there.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
Yep, correct.
All right. And then let's switch gears a little bit and get more into the 2026 general fund budget for the village of Suamico specifically.
Yep.
We talked a little bit about a revaluation, and we had one done in 2025. Something that I always see, and it's not just in Suamico, it's in any community where there's a revaluation being done. If you see anything online, like on Facebook, almost instantly you'll see comments related to, oh, well, my tax bill is going to go way up. They're just looking to increase my taxes. Can you maybe debunk that myth a little bit?
Yeah, so the revaluation doesn't necessarily equate to taxes going up. It really is spreading the levy amount that we have differently, more proportionately to the value of the property. So really, as it relates to the budget, our budget increased only by $9,000 this year. So even though we had a reval, that doesn't mean we've increased our budget and need to cover that expense. So I guess that's kind of how those relate.
Yeah, I mean, the working theory is, so let's say last year we had $1 million that we levied for or taxed for.
Yep.
We did a revaluation. The next year, we would still only get $1 million because that tax rate would have dropped. So for example, back in 2024, yeah, it was somewhere around 3.7, and after this revaluation, our tax rate is now 2.7,
Yep.
$2.70, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So just trying to illustrate a little bit on how, yes, you have a revaluation. Almost everyone, I can almost guarantee everyone's assessed values went up, but the tax rate went down by almost a full dollar. So that's how that works.
Yeah, because really with the reval, if your valuation went up, so did your neighbors and so did the people in the subdivision over. And so really, it's the total value went up, but you need less tax rate because of the value.
Right. So getting a little into the weeds here, the 2026 budget, is there anything that you wanted to highlight for our residents on what's going on with the village in 2026?
I guess just a kind of little breakdown of the 26 budget. We use about 60% of it on operational costs. We use about 20% on to pay off some debt, and then we use about 20% for capital purchases. Is how the 26 budget worked out. We're planning some road improvements of about $1.1 million and planning an upgraded playground equipment at Calavera for 26.
All right. And if residents wanted to learn everything about our budget, where can they go?
If they wanted to learn more about the budget is in full on the village's website under the finance department. There's a tab on the left that highlights budget, and you can find the 26 budget there. If there are further questions, they can either stop in and ask for me, Katie, and I can help out and talk through anything, or they can send an email as well.
Okay. All right, Katie, is there anything else that you wanted to get out there before we concluded our session?
No, I think we covered quite a bit.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Katie. Appreciate all the things that you do for our village and keeping our finances in order. And Happy New Year to you, and enjoy Hawaii.
Sounds great. Thanks.